I believed that if you treat a child as your own flesh and blood, they will eventually grow up to appreciate the sacrifices you made for them. I was wrong. Sometimes, no matter how much love, money, and time you pour into a person, greed will always consume their soul. My name is David Miller. At 48 years old, I spent over 2 decades working as a custom home builder and commercial contractor. 15 years ago, I met Sarah, the love of my life. Sarah was a widow raising her 8-year-old son, Brandon. When Sarah and I married, I didn't see Brandon as a stepson, I saw him as my own boy. When Sarah was diagnosed with early-onset cancer 5 years ago, my world shattered. I spent millions of dollars on specialized treatment, taking a step back from my contracting firm to nurse her night and day. Before Sarah passed away, she held my hand and asked me to take care of Brandon to ensure he had a secure future. I swore to her on her deathbed that I would protect him forever. To fulfill my promise, I built a sprawling 4-acre estate in the countryside, a magnificent custom home valued at over $2.5 million. I poured my life savings and my personal craftsmanship into every single brick, timber, and glass panel. I wanted Brandon to have a permanent sanctuary. When Brandon graduated from college, I gave him a cushy executive job at my holding company, bought him a brand new luxury vehicle, and allowed him to live in the main house while I moved into the renovated guest house on the north wing of the estate to give him space to grow. Then came Chloe. Brandon met Chloe at a high society networking event, and within 6 months they were engaged. Chloe came from a pretentious family obsessed with social status and luxury labels. From the moment she set foot on the estate, she made it clear that my presence was an eyesore. To Chloe, I was just an aging 48-year-old contractor who wore flannel shirts, worked with his hands, and didn't fit into her elite social circle. Slowly, Brandon began to change under her influence. He started speaking to me with condescension. Whenever I visited the main kitchen for breakfast, Chloe would make passive-aggressive comments about how older relatives ought to know their place and stay out of sight when young, successful couples were entertaining guests. Brandon sat right beside her, sipping expensive wine, nodding in agreement. The breaking point occurred 3 weeks before their lavish $200,000 wedding. Chloe decided that her wealthy, influential family needed to stay at the estate for the entire wedding week. Instead of simply asking me for accommodation space, Brandon called me into the main living room. In front of Chloe and her arrogant mother, Brandon handed me a pre-written letter. He told me that at 48, I was holding him back from stepping into high society. He claimed that having an older, working-class stepfather living on the property was embarrassing to Chloe's family. He demanded that I pack up my personal belongings and move into an extended-stay motel across town before the wedding guests arrived. I stood there, looking at the boy I had raised, funded, and protected for 15 years. I asked him if he remembered the promise I made to his mother. Brandon sneered and said that his mother was gone, that I was just a stepfather with no real blood relation, and that it was time for me to get out of his house. Chloe added with a smirk that a broken, middle-aged man should be grateful he was given a home for as long as he was. My heart shattered, but in its place grew an icy, unbreakable resolve. They thought I was a helpless, aging man with nowhere to turn. They forgot one tiny, crucial detail. I had built that entire estate through my private development LLC, financed entirely through my personal inheritance and commercial capital. The land title, the house deed, and every structural permit were held exclusively under my name and my revocable trust. Brandon didn't own a single blade of grass. I didn't argue, I didn't raise my voice. I quietly walked back to my quarters, packed my custom suits, my wife's journals, and my architectural blueprints, and checked into a 5-star hotel downtown. The next day, I met with my senior estate attorney, Arthur Pendleton. I instructed him to issue an immediate revocation of all corporate privileges granted to Brandon, freeze the trust allowances funded by my accounts, and file an emergency notice of eviction and land seizure against the estate for unauthorized occupancy and breach of contract. Knowing that Brandon and Chloe were hosting their grand rehearsal dinner and pre-wedding gala at the estate with over 50 elite guests, including local politicians, judges, and Chloe's country club parents, I timed the legal execution with absolute precision. At 8:00 p.m. on the night of the rehearsal dinner, the main hall of my mansion was filled with orchestra music, fine catering, and high society laughter. Brandon was standing near the grand fireplace, raising a glass of vintage champagne, boasting about his grand estate and his family's wealth. Suddenly, the heavy double doors of the estate burst open. I walked into the grand hall dressed in a bespoke dark suit, accompanied by Attorney Pendleton, 2 county court officers, and the local sheriff. The ambient music cut off instantly as guests turned around in shock. Brandon's face flushed red with anger. He marched toward me, yelling at me in front of everyone, calling me an unhinged old man and demanding the sheriff throw me off his property. Attorney Pendleton stepped forward, opened a leather portfolio, and presented the certified court orders directly to Brandon, Chloe's father, and the press representative present at the party. In a voice that echoed through the high ceilings, Pendleton announced that effective immediately, Brandon was stripped of all corporate titles at Miller Contracting. His trust fund was permanently terminated, and the estate was being placed under immediate lock-and-key order by the county court. Pendleton revealed that Brandon had zero legal claim to the property, having lived there entirely on my charitable lease, a lease that was now legally dissolved. The room erupted into stunned silence. Chloe gasped, looking at Brandon with shock and confusion. Her father, a proud corporate executive, snatched the documents from Pendleton's hands, reading the deed confirmation that proved I was the sole $3.5 million owner of the entire property. Before Brandon could process the revelation, the sheriff presented a 24-hour court eviction order, warning Brandon and Chloe that all personal items had to be removed from the premises by noon the following day, or they would be arrested for criminal trespassing. Chloe turned on Brandon in front of every single guest, screaming that he was a liar and a fraud who had tricked her into thinking he was a multimillionaire heir. Her parents, thoroughly humiliated by the public disgrace, stormed out of the hall, taking their family and canceling the wedding venue bookings on the spot. Within an hour, the grand party was completely deserted. Brandon sat on the marble stairs of the foyer, his tux unbuttoned, weeping uncontrollably. He looked up at me with bloodshot eyes, begging for mercy, claiming he was influenced by Chloe and that he still saw me as his father. I looked down at him with quiet dignity. I told him that being a father means teaching a child how to be a human being, but being a man means accepting the consequences when you trade loyalty for greed. I reminded him that he had thrown away 15 years of love for a moment of arrogance, and that I had fulfilled my promise to his mother by giving him every tool to succeed, tools he chose to destroy with his own hands. The next morning, the moving trucks arrived. Brandon and Chloe split up 2 days later, their engagement bitterly canceled. Brandon was forced to move into a small studio apartment on the outskirts of town, taking an entry-level job at a local hardware store to pay off his mounting personal credit debts. Today, at 48, I have reopened my master building firm, traveling the country to design custom timber estates for people who truly appreciate hard work and integrity. I live in total peace, knowing that karma doesn't require anger or revenge. It simply requires standing tall, holding the deed to your own life, and letting people reap what they sow.